The alley was silent, except for the faint hum of the city in the background. Barron Trump, his tall frame silhouetted under the dim streetlights, froze as the shadowy figure stepped forward. The man's hand trembled slightly as he brandished a small knife, his voice low but tense. "Empty your pockets," the man demanded, his tone a mixture of desperation and authority. Barron raised his hands slowly, his calm demeanor belying the adrenaline rushing through his veins. He was no stranger to tense situations, but this was different. There was something in the man's voice that caught his attention. It wasn't anger, it wasn't malice, it was fear. Barron's eyes locked with the man's, his voice steady. "Okay," he said, "let's not do anything rash, I'll give you what I have." The man, who appeared to be in his mid-30s, stepped closer, his movements hurried but unsteady. He was average in build, his hoodie drawn tight around his face. His shoes were scuffed, his hands rough, and his eyes darted nervously as if anticipating danger at every turn. "You're wasting time," the man barked, his voice rising. "Just give me your wallet." Barron nodded, reaching into his jacket pocket. "It's all yours," he said, handing over the sleek black wallet. "Take it." The man snatched it quickly, flipping it open with one hand. His eyes scanned the contents, and when he saw the ID card, his expression changed. He froze, his breathing quickening. "Trump," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," Barron replied evenly, "but I'm not here to make a scene. If you need help, let's talk." The man's grip on the wallet tightened, his knuckles whitening. "Talk?" he repeated, incredulous. "You think I want to talk? I've got nothing. No home, no money, no future. My family's falling apart, and you're just walking around like life's a game." Barron's gaze didn't waver. He could see the desperation etched into every line on the man's face. This wasn't someone who wanted to hurt anyone. This was someone who felt cornered, trapped by circumstances beyond his control. "I'm sorry you're going through this," Barron said softly. "I can't imagine how hard it must be." The man scoffed, though his tone carried less venom than before. "Hard? You don't know the meaning of hard. You've probably never had a day in your life where you didn't have everything handed to you." Barron nodded, acknowledging the truth in the man's words. "You're right," he said. "I've been incredibly fortunate, but that's why I want to help. If you let me, we can figure something out." The man's eyes darted between Barron and the alley's exit. He looked like a wild animal, torn between fight and flight. "Why should I trust you? How do I know this isn't some trap?" "You don't," Barron admitted. "But what do you have to lose?" The man lowered the knife slightly, his shoulders sagging as the adrenaline began to fade. For a moment, they stood in silence, the weight of the situation hanging heavy in the air. "What's your name?" Barron asked. The man hesitated before answering. "Leo." "Okay, Leo," Barron said, his tone calm but firm. "I'm not here to judge you. You've had a rough time, and you're trying to survive. But this isn't the way. Let me help you." Leo looked at Barron, his hardened expression softening. "Why would you help me? You don't even know me," Barron shrugged lightly. "Because I believe everyone deserves a second chance." Leo stared at him for a long moment, the knife now hanging loosely at his side. For the first time in what felt like ages, someone was looking at him without fear, anger, or pity. It wasn't what he had expected, and it left him unsure of how to respond. "You're serious?" Leo asked finally. "Completely," Barron said. "Let me call someone who can help you and your family." Leo's grip on the knife loosened until it fell to the ground with a dull clink. He took a shaky breath, his hands trembling as he ran them through his hair. "I don't deserve this," he muttered. "I've screwed up so many times." Barron stepped closer, his movements deliberate but unthreatening. "We all make mistakes," he said. "What matters is what you do next." For the first time that night, Leo's eyes filled with something other than desperation. It was hope. A fragile, tentative thing that he hadn't felt in years. "Okay," Leo said finally. "Let's talk." The alley grew quieter as the initial tension dissolved into a fragile truce. Leo leaned against the wall, his head hanging low, the weight of his circumstances now fully visible. Barron Trump stood a few feet away, his hands in his jacket pockets, waiting patiently. He didn't push or demand, he simply waited for Leo to speak. Leo exhaled deeply, his voice breaking the silence. "I used to have a normal life," he began, his eyes fixed on the ground. "I had a job, a home, a family that looked up to me. but things started falling apart about a year ago. Barron nodded silently, encouraging him to continue. I worked in construction, Leo said. Not fancy, but it paid the bills. Then the company I worked for went under. They told us it was a downturn, that they couldn't keep us on. Just like that, 20 years of my life gone in a single meeting. Leo's voice wavered as he recounted the layoffs, the promises of severance that never came, and the endless cycle of rejections as he applied for new jobs. I'd go out every day, looking for something, anything, but it's like the world didn't have room for me anymore. Barron's brow furrowed, his empathy growing with each word. What about your family? He asked gently. Leo's jaw tightened, and he let out a bitter chuckle. My wife, Hannah, she tried to hold everything together. She took extra shifts at the diner, tried to keep food on the table. But it wasn't enough. The bills piled up, and the landlord didn't care about our sob stories. He paused, his voice trembling. When we got evicted, that was the breaking point. We ended up at a shelter, and I promised Hannah I'd fix things. I told her I'd find a way to get us back on our feet. But that was months ago, and I've got nothing to show for it. Barron shifted slightly, giving Leo the space to collect himself. So tonight, Barron said, carefully, you thought this was your only option? Leo nodded, his shoulders slumping. My kid, my son, Ethan, he's just a baby. We ran out of diapers yesterday, and the shelter said they couldn't give us more until next week. I couldn't stand the thought of him crying all night because we couldn't even provide for him. He looked up, his eyes filled with anguish. I didn't want to do this, but when I saw you walking alone, I thought it would be easy. Quick. Just enough to get what I needed for Ethan. Barron felt a lump form in his throat. This wasn't just a story of bad decisions. It was a story of a man pushed to the edge by circumstances he couldn't control. I can't imagine what that's like, Barron said softly. But I think I understand why you felt like you had no choice. Leo sighed, his hands trembling. I didn't think about the consequences. I just wanted to feel like I was doing something, you know? Like I wasn't completely useless. Barron took a step closer, his calm demeanor steadying the conversation. You're not useless, Leo, he said firmly. You're trying to take care of your family the best way you know how. That doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you human. Leo shook his head, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. You don't know me. I've failed them so many times. I don't deserve help. That's not true, Barron replied. You're still here. You're still trying, and that means there's hope. The words seemed to strike a chord with Leo. He wiped his face with the sleeve of his hoodie, his breathing uneven. What kind of help are we talking about? He asked hesitantly. Barron reached for his phone. I know people who can help. Organizations that specialize in situations like yours. They can provide immediate assistance for your family and help you find stable work. Leo looked skeptical, but didn't object. You really think they'll do that? Just like that? Barron nodded. They've done it before, and I'll make sure they follow through. He dialed the number of a contact he had met through a community outreach event, a nonprofit director named Melissa, who focused on helping families in crisis. As the phone rang, Barron glanced at Leo. This is just the first step, he said, but it's a step in the right direction. Melissa picked up on the third ring. Barron, it's good to hear from you, she said warmly. What's going on? I've got someone here who needs help, Barron explained, keeping his tone steady. He and his family are in a shelter, and they're struggling to make ends meet. Can you connect him to your resources? Melissa's voice was compassionate. Of course. Where are you? I can have someone meet you tonight. Barron gave her the location, and after a brief exchange, he hung up. Help is on the way, he told Leo. They'll make sure you and your family have what you need. Leo stared at Barron, his expression a mix of gratitude and disbelief. Why are you doing this? He asked quietly. Because I can, Barron replied simply, and because you deserve a chance. As they waited, the tension between them eased further. Leo opened up more, sharing stories about his life before everything fell apart. He talked about how much he loved building things, how he used to come home covered in dust but proud of the day's work. He talked about Ethan's first steps, about Hannah's determination, and about the dreams he once had for his family. Barron listened intently, never interrupting. He saw in Leo not a criminal, but a father desperate to protect what mattered most. And in that moment, Barron realized how easily their roles could have been reversed, if not for the privileges he had been born into. When the nonprofit representative arrived, Leo's shoulders straightened, and a glimmer of hope returned to his eyes. Barron introduced them and stepped back, watching as the first steps toward change began.